This is footage of BRYAN KOHBERGER turning his vehicle around for the last time on the 13th of November 2022 at 52 seconds past 6 minutes past 4 o'clock in the morning, and heading to the house where he would commit 4 murders. And you know where we are today. BRYAN wants to avoid being sentenced to death for something he did. I can tell you all 4 of the victims would have wanted to avoid the death sentences he was bringing along with him. It wouldn't just be death, but an extremely painful, agonizing exit for each of them, which is exactly what BRYAN wanted and what he has managed to avoid experiencing himself.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. Now, watching the CTV footage, it's past 4 a.m. and no one is about, although a few lights are still on. One has the impression BRYAN had many opportunities to simply change his mind, and yet he didn't. He was determined to exact a kind of painful vengeance for perceived slight's real death in exchange for the protracted social death he felt he had been facing. Has anyone used that term, social death, to describe BRYAN KOHBERGER besides me on this channel? Anyway, that should tell you something about the level of gratuitous and superficial understanding and insight when it comes to this case. Now, we are going to talk a little bit about this excellent animation that's been done by the channel Azget Industries. Head to that channel if you haven't already. I'll put a link to that channel in the description. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please hit the thanks button and let's get started. So I've obviously visited the scene. It was really interesting revisiting the scene through this animation, using actual CCTV, the affidavit, and joining all these dots with common sense. We see an animation that basically renders movements of the Idaho 4 killer in a 12-minute video. It's really well done. Now, as some of you know, as I say, I drove to the area. I really didn't know one could drive around the adjacent block and then approach the funhouse from the top of that side. And the CCTV footage not only demonstrates that and proves that, but the animator's gone to the trouble to figure out what the layout is. Certainly more effort than I did when I was there, because I simply drove to the house. I didn't drive much around it and didn't really walk much around that side of it. I did look at where there were cameras, but what the animation does is, it makes a lot of sense of the many drive-bys and attempted turns. When you look at the CCTV, it's very hard to make out. Also, often the car turns towards the camera and it basically blinds the camera. In certain instances, you can't even tell what kind of car it is. In other instances, you can clearly see it is a white vehicle, and in other instances, you can see it looks like a somewhat elongated white vehicle. In other words, KOHBERGER's Hyundai Elantra. And so all of these drive-bys and attempted turns indicate a killer who was absolutely clear what he intended to do that night. It's not the worst kind of crime is premeditated murder. It's a crime with deliberation. And that is a particularly shocking and heinous crime. It's where you intend to kill someone before you do it. And so this is what the killer was thinking when he was driving there, and he had his knife with him. But more importantly, he had this killer psychology that is driving him as well. Now, one thing that appears to be in dispute is whether the DoorDash driver ever parked beside KOHBERGER's vehicle, or indeed if they even made eye contact, as I think she said they did. I suppose a skillful defense attorney could raise reasonable doubt that the DoorDash driver or an accomplice committed the crime, since she said she was there, and she was there so close to the time of the actual crime. As far as I know, the DoorDash driver said she parked on the driveway and went in through the front door. Isn't that what she said? Or maybe she parked on the driveway and went up to the sliding door, but BRYAN parked at the top and came down through the sliding door. And I must say that is a much more secure way of getting in without being seen. If you park in the driveway, everyone's going to see your vehicle. If you come in through that door, and especially if you come out through that door, you're definitely going to be seen. The above parking area is more shaded. There's less line of sight from the other residences that are there. This is a real honeycomb sort of area, just like it's like a maze, and they're just residences all over the place. It really was crazy to go in there thinking that he wouldn't be seen. But if you take the brazenness of it, and then the fact that he went into this house with 4 students, I think that he expected to go in and come out, and I don't think he expected Xana to be awake or Ethan to be awake. I think that he wanted to target just Maddie Mogan, and then he made all of these additional mistakes. If he'd been a little calmer and he'd taken a little bit more time and he'd been more cool-headed, perhaps he could have executed the crime. I'm just talking about from a criminal psychology perspective in a more targeted way. Instead, I think he really made a mess, because I think he was very nervous, and I think he lost his nerve, certainly towards the end, fortunately. And we can see BRYAN KOHBERGER has done exactly the same thing with his trial. He's lost his nerve right at the end, right as it's gotten to trial, and he's seen how much evidence they've got on him. He's lost his nerve in standing, and facing up to his own trial. So, in the same way that he ran out of the crime scene, he basically fled halfway through and was seen doing it. I think the same thing has happened in terms of his own criminal trial. In any event, I'm not going to take it further than that. Head to Azget Industries, the YouTube channel, for the original video with CCTV inserts. It's very well done. And let's think about the future of true crime. Is it this? Are we going to see these types of animations in future? Should it be? In future, I would certainly like to see similar high-quality recreations made in true crime cases and fielded in court. I think it should become non-negotiable, must-have evidence. We certainly have the capacity to do that. This is both from the prosecution and the defense. And so both of them can field an animation that they think is more compelling and leave it up to the jury to decide which one ticks all the boxes in terms of the evidence, which one makes the most sense. Does that make sense? I'm going to play out with some of my footage from my visit to Moscow. Thank you for listening. Have a good 4th of July weekend, and I'll see you guys next time.